And we come on this hour with breaking news. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Jansing. We have a growing number of questions right now, including what this ruling overturning Roe v. Wade could mean for rights ranging from privacy to gay marriage. But let's start with what we know now. Scenes popping up all across the United States like this. These are the live pictures of protests outside the U.S. Supreme Court. People started gathering immediately once they announced that this decision was coming down. The crowds now are only growing. And already, no action required. There are new restrictions on abortions ready to go in on 13 different states. Look at those. Those are the ones highlighted on your screen. They have what are called trigger laws. They are triggered by the fact that the Supreme Court just overturned Roe. For example, one example, Idaho's law would make performing an abortion a felony. We're also going to dig into that passage from the decision from Justice Clarence Thomas, where he writes, quote, "In future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell." He's talking about reconsidering decisions on gay rights and the right to contraception. Joining me now, NBC's Julia Ainsley, inside the growing protest outside the Supreme Court. Josh Letterman is at the White House, where the president just spoke. And Barbara McQuaid, former U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst. Julia, I've been watching that crowd grow bigger literally by the minute. What's it like there? What's the mood? What are people telling you?
Well, here, Chris, if you thought that what we got from the leak just a few weeks ago would take any steam or pressure off of this situation when the final decision came, you would be wrong. I was there that day. It is even more fraught today. We're seeing a lot of intense emotions. Some women are crying. People who have had an abortion, some people who feel directly, personally violated by this decision today.
This is insane. And going over to the other side especially was, I wanted to yell at the people there. Just how? It feels like a betrayal. It feels like my country doesn't love me and appreciate my body as a woman. I can't even chant because I can't say anything. It hurts.
I'm worried for the young women who are on opposition, who don't understand how at risk their lives may be.
Polling showed the majority of Americans did not want the country to overturn, the court to overturn Roe v. Wade. A majority of Americans. But majorities of Americans in key places did vote to put people in power who were ultimately responsible for the makeup of the Supreme Court. In other words, enough Republicans in enough key places helped ensure a Republican majority could confirm conservative justices. Now, if you are wondering how it could be that the court is so out of step with the opinion of a majority of all Americans, consider this. 80 million eligible voters do not vote. President Biden repeated as much earlier this afternoon, saying the right to health care can be restored with a bigger Democratic majority in Congress.
With your vote, you can act. You can have the final word. This is not over.
Joining me now, NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams, NBC News correspondent Julia Ainsley from the Supreme Court as well, outside of it, Slate senior editor and MSNBC law and politics analyst Dahlia Lithwick, and former U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst Barbara McQuaid. Pete, you know this better than anybody. We were, of course, expecting this, but walk us through what we learned today.
Well, this decision tracks very closely to the draft opinion written in February that was leaked in May. It makes the same arguments that there is no constitutional right to abortion, that in order to find a constitutional right through the 14th Amendment, it must be something that is deeply rooted in the nation's history and tradition and essential to the concept of ordered liberty. And for that reason, the Supreme Court said the Roe v. Wade ruling flunks the test. It says it was egregiously wrong when it was originally ruled on in 1973, and that therefore the principle of sticking with decisions known as stare decisis doesn't apply because it was wrong and has been damaging to the country. Now, on this question of whether the decision undercuts other decisions that have found a right to privacy, like Griswold for contraceptives, Lawrence for intimate relations, Obergefell for same-sex marriage, Justice Alito goes out of his way twice to say, make no mistake, we're ruling only on abortion, and it's different because it involves a potential life. And Justice Kavanaugh in his concurrence says much the same. He says we're only deciding about abortion. We're not casting doubt on any of those other decisions. You're right that Justice Thomas says, nonetheless, he thinks the court should now look back at some of those other decisions that depended on a concept of substantive due process. But the dissenters say the court can't have it both ways. It either has to stick with its logic about history and tradition, or it has to say that it only counts for abortion. You can't have it both ways. So I think that's a debate that's going to continue for some time. Some of those trigger law states depended on very quick action by the state attorney general to declare that the court had overturned Roe. So in 5 or 6 of those trigger law states, as of right now, abortion is illegal. The rest of them will follow suit. And ultimately, within, say, several weeks, up to 30 days, I think the rest of the 24 states that are likely to ban abortion will join them as well. So this decision doesn't ban abortion nationwide. It just removes it as a constitutional right, leaving it up to the states. And this is a first, Katie, because the Supreme Court in history has never before granted a widely recognized constitutional right and then taken it back. So this is historic in many ways.
Pete, I know we're talking about a majority here, but Justice John Roberts, his majority concurrence was nuanced. So it didn't necessarily say that Roe v. Wade should be overturned. And I wonder, does this mean that if not for one conservative justice, if it was one more liberal justice or moderate justice, that maybe this would have gone in a different direction?
Oh, without question. So he did not join his colleagues in overturning Roe. So to be clear, the central issue in this case was really the one the court granted was, can a state ban abortion before viability? That was the issue raised by the law in Mississippi that would ban abortions after 15 weeks. And the central holding, really, of Roe and the follow-on case of Casey put together was that states cannot ban abortion before viability. They can restrict it, but they can't ban it. They can ban it after viability. Roberts said that made no sense. He said the Mississippi law should be upheld, but he said the court should not have gone the rest of the way to overturn Roe. That wasn't necessary, he said, and was going too fast. So it's 5-4 on overturning Roe.
Pete Williams. Pete, I know you're very busy, so thank you very much for joining us this hour. Julia, you are on the steps, or almost on the steps of the Supreme Court, since there's fencing around the Supreme Court. What are you hearing out there from people reacting?
Well, that's right, Katie. We can't get on the steps of the Supreme Court because there's a barricade that's actually been there since that opinion leaked in May. And as I've been here, Katie, I would say the crowd is getting denser and things are getting more tense by the hour here. We have a number of people on both sides, sometimes engaging in shouting matches with each other. We've also spoken to people who were devastated by this opinion and also some who are celebrating today. Let's take a listen to some from the pro-life side who are overjoyed at this news.
It's a roller coaster of emotion. It's complete and utter joy that it was finally overturned, but the determination, a steely determination that the battle is not over.
Personally, I've had people in my family have abortions, and they have felt the regret years and years down the line, and they're still dealing and facing with the trauma today. And if Roe v. Wade wouldn't have been legal inside of the United States, I would have family members that I don't have today.
So as you can see, now we're having some more speakers come into the area. And Katie, just behind me, we have an increased presence from Capitol Police. They have now lined the barricade. You can't see behind this crowd, but there are police in front of the barricade, in front of the Supreme Court. People are now getting quiet as we see more speakers come take the stage. Unfortunately, from here, I can't see who that is, but we are expecting some lawmakers to come out and speak to this crowd today as Congress tries to drum up support for how Democrats could now work to try to codify Roe since it has now been struck down today by this court.
This is a personal moment for millions of women. One of them, Cori Bush. She's the representative here in St. Louis of this district. I had a chance to talk to her earlier today. Take a listen to a little bit of what she said, Katie.
I'm standing at the place where I had my own abortion care services at 18 years old. I got raped when I was 17. And as we're talking, we're sitting with the secretary. That announcement was made. It broke my heart because I'm thinking about the people who today found out that they were pregnant, who found out they were pregnant a few weeks ago, and we're trying to figure out what to do. People, it takes more than a minute to make a decision about what you're going to do that will affect your life for years to come and affect the life of another human being. It's not something that people can automatically just make a decision in a matter of weeks or a matter of a couple days or a few hours. Sometimes it takes time, and we're stripping that from people.
Hallie, this will be difficult, especially for women of color, poor women who don't necessarily have the means to travel, pay the airfare, take off time from work. So the closest state being Illinois, we're told that anywhere they can travel between 7 to 22 hours to get these abortions legally and safely. Hallie?
Kathy Park, live for us there in Jackson, Mississippi. Kathy, thank you. I should note that Vice President Kamala Harris is stepping to the stage. As we wait for her to begin her remarks, Jake, I very quickly will go to you because you are in a state that is taking a very different tack, right? California is working to shore up access to abortions for women, not just in its state, but in neighboring states as well.
That's right, Hallie. In a sense, I'm standing in a different nation than the one that Cal and Kathy are standing in. In this state where, you have new laws, about 13 of them moving their way through the state capitol here. They do everything from empower nurses to provide first trimester abortion services. They provide funding to out-of-state patients who need to come here. And we're expecting in about half an hour, Governor Newsom will sign a bill here in California that will further enshrine the constitutional right to abortion services under the state constitution. So an extraordinarily different environment here than the one you're talking to Cal and Kathy about there. And of course, that makes people who are in favor of reproductive choice very grateful to live here, but there's very complicated feelings they have as well. We've been speaking to people all morning here on the Embarcadero in San Francisco, where I am. Here's how one of them described her feelings.
I feel worried about people who aren't in California and may not have the same benefit of their state's rights. So just concerned about the direction of the country and the courts, because I always looked up to the Supreme Court and thought that they were objective.
Not only are we seeing, of course, moves in the public sphere here, we're also seeing extraordinary moves from Planned Parenthood, the best known abortion provider.
Yeah.
They're going to also be making big expansions here, Alan.
Jake Ward, live in California. Thank you. We will go now to the former California senator, current vice president, who is talking about this decision now.
Today, as of right now, as of this minute, we can only talk about what Roe v. Wade protected. Past tense. This is a healthcare crisis. Because understand, millions of women in America will go to bed tonight without access to the health care and reproductive care that they had this morning, without access to the same health care or reproductive health care that their mothers and grandmothers had for 50 years. This is the first time in the history of our nation that a constitutional right has been taken from the people of America. And what is that right? Some might ask. It's the right to privacy. Think about it as the right for each person to make intimate decisions about heart and home. Decisions about the right to start a family, including contraception, such as IUDs, the morning after pill. Decisions about whether to have a child, including, as Senator Durbin mentioned, through in vitro fertilization. Decisions to marry the person you love. Obergefell v. Hodges. Loving versus Virginia. This opinion also says, when you read it, that abortion is not deeply rooted in our nation's history. They offer that in the opinion as a foundation for the decision they rendered today. In holding that it is not deeply rooted in our history, today's decision on that theory then calls into question other rights that we thought were settled, such as the right to use birth control, the right to same-sex marriage, the right to interracial marriage. The great aspiration of our nation has been to expand freedom. But the expansion of freedom clearly is not inevitable. It is not something that just happens. Not unless we defend our most fundamental principles. Not unless we elect leaders who stand up for those principles. The strength of our nation has always been that we move forward. Today, I invite all people to stand together in defense of one of the most fundamental ideals and principles that for generations, for centuries, I believe we had held dear, which is that fundamental principle about the importance of liberty. To stand for liberty, to stand for freedom, to stand for self-determination, and for the right to privacy. You have the power to elect leaders who will defend and protect your rights. And as the president said earlier today, with your vote, you can act, and you have the final word. So this is not over. God bless you, and God bless America.
You have been listening to Vice President Kamala Harris speaking in Illinois, clearly with deeply held passion on this issue, a deeply felt speech from the vice president there. This fight is not over, you heard her say, as she talked about the potential for other rights that could be lost in the wake of today's Supreme Court decision overturning Roe versus Wade. I want to bring in now Congresswoman Jackie Speier, Democrat from Harris's home state, of course, of California, and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Democrat from Massachusetts. Thank you both for being here and for your patience, too, as we listen to that speech from Vice President Harris, a speech that will make history on a day that makes history because of who she is and her role in this country on a day like today. I'll ask both of you to just give your reaction to what we've just heard. Congresswoman Pressley, I'll start with you.
Well, I think she gave voice to the anger, the sense of betrayal that everyone who values freedom, the constitutional right to health care and abortion care is health care, is feeling at this moment. And that vulnerability will be disproportionately borne by our most marginalized. We know there's a Black maternal morbidity crisis. This is an issue that Vice President Harris has led on. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth. We know that for those that do not have means to travel to safe haven states, that they will be left with no options. And so this is a matter of life and death for our LGBTQ siblings, for the disabled, for low-income women, for women of color, for Black women. The fact that we find ourselves, as she said, with fewer rights this evening
than we started with this morning. That we could be talking about forced birth in a country that does not have paid leave, that does not have childcare, on the heels of a baby formula shortage. And, I think about our just having celebrated and recognized Juneteenth, a celebration of freedom. And the fact that our bodily autonomy, my bodily autonomy, that of my daughter, our reproductive freedom and rights, that this Supreme Court has obstructed the will of the people. So every lever must be pulled, every level of government must be engaged. I'm a co-lead of the Women's Health Protection Act. I chair the Abortion Rights and Access Task Force under the Pro-Choice Caucus. The House passed the Women's Health Protection Act, which would codify Roe v. Wade and the right to abortion care, a right that we've had constitutionally for 50 years that was just rolled back. The Senate, the filibuster must be abolished, and the Senate must pass this and codify the right to abortion care.
Congresswoman Spear, I'll go to you, and I know you are tight on time, so I want to ask you, when we heard from Vice President Harris, and of course Congresswoman Presley is reflecting this, that this fight is not over, it must continue. What is the most effective avenue, just in a practical, concrete, strategic way? What is the next step that you will take to work to shore up protections for abortion access on the federal level?
Holly, thank you. I think the first thing we need to do is help women across this country recognize that medication abortion, which is the form of a pill that a woman takes, is available to them, that in fact 59% of women actually have an abortion with medication pills, and that we make that readily available to them. I support what the Vice President said and what my colleague Ayanna Pressley has said. This is the greatest setback of women's rights in the history of this country. We've never had the Supreme Court take away rights from people. And it's ironic that yesterday they expanded the rights for gun owners, and today they're taking rights away from women to control their own body. They are, in fact, mandating government mandates of pregnancy in this country. It cannot stand, and we are going to take it to the November midterm elections. We need to pick up 2 Senate seats so we can have an opportunity to have more clout in the Senate. We need to get to 60 if we're going to overturn the filibuster. And I think that we've got to, all stops are out. We have to take the steps necessary to protect women. Half the women in this country could be criminalized because they live in states that are not going to be offering abortions.
One of the things we heard the Vice President allude to is what could be next, potentially. Justice Alito in the decision wrote that the dissent suggests that our decision calls into question Griswold, Eisenstadt, Lawrence, Obergefell, decisions that protect, for example, the right to birth control, access, same-sex marriage, et cetera. But we have stated unequivocally that nothing in this opinion should be understood to cast doubt on precedents that do not concern abortion. However, Justice Thomas wrote, in future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell. Do you think that is a realistic risk at this point? In other words, how much do you believe this Supreme Court, as it is currently made up, could roll back where we are?
I think it's a very real threat. I think it's also a threat to have a national ban on abortions, and that's why I say to California, we can't take that lightly because we've got great laws on the books, and the governor is about to sign one that enshrines it in the Constitution. But I absolutely believe that they are on a path to ban contraception, to affect trans persons in terms of their rights, to ban same-sex marriages, and have an effect on LGBTQ rights in this country. There is a war out there, and we need to recognize that we've got to armor up.